We're going live.
Let's go.
All right. Here we go. This is the start of episode 11. If you notice in the background, we actually have the Army flag back up, so it feels good to have another fellow Army guy here. I'm joined tonight for episode 11 with Captain Retired. Raychad goes by Ray.
Yep.
Vannatta, so we'll go Ray. Tonight we have Che, Ray, Chad, who's running late. So a lot of different things. Thank you for coming, as we said before. So as always, we'll start off with a quote, and then we're going to change some things up a little bit based on some recommendations. But so the first quote we have, you saw a little bit earlier. I thought it was a great one. So it is politically incorrect. There's actually, as I say it, if you go online, they've actually changed it. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
And you'll understand why. So the first quote, always try to find it applicable to my guests. So this is obviously about pilots. And helicopter pilots. So it's the pilot's prayer. God grant me the eyes of an eagle, the judgment of an owl, the quickness of a hummingbird, the reflexes of a cat, the heart of a bull, and of course the balls of an Army helicopter pilot. And the balls part, if you look on the internet, has actually been changed. So, but thank you.
Right on.
Welcome.
Good quote.
And so we've got some criticism, mainly from the crew that's here all the time. So we're going to change it up a little bit. We're not going to wait 45 minutes to have the first featured whiskey. We're going to start it off right now. They get upset that it takes too long for us to do that. So we'll jump right into whiskey, right? I mean, I was hoping to be more about the guests, but these guys are all about whiskey, food, crumble, all kinds of food back there. So obviously we'll start right. And it's actually the first featured whiskey for people that are new to the podcast or aren't is always brought by the guest. So super excited that what you picked. As you've seen earlier when you came in, I'm a huge Buffalo Trace guy. I'm a Buffalo Trace junkie, I'd say. So we're actually our first featured whiskey, which we already have in our Glens, is Buffalo Trace single barrel or straight bourbon whiskey. We were drinking a single barrel before, but as everybody knows, Buffalo Trace comes from the distillery Buffalo Trace, which is in Frankfort, Kentucky, owned by Sazerac. It's been owned by Sazerac since 1992. It's been known by several names throughout its history. Some of the most famous are the George T. Stagg Distillery, OFC Distillery, and Buffalo Trace is actually the name straight bourbon. And one of the things that they try to claim, that came out in 1999. And then one of the things that the distillery claims it's the oldest continuous operating distillery all the way through Prohibition. So they had the special license to distill for medicinal purposes, which is it still serves medicinal purposes. Yeah.
Medicinal purposes.
Exactly. Yeah. And the Buffalo Trace, for those people that don't know that, it's actually named after an ancient buffalo crossing that's on the banks of the Kentucky River in Frankfort County. Buffalo Trace that we're drinking right now is actually made from mash bill number 1. So this is, as you see a trend, this is one of those whiskeys that they actually don't tell you everything about the mash bill, but it's mash bill 1, which is the low rye mash bill. This mash bill is used in a bunch of other products that you might know: Benchmark, Old Carter 8, 8 Buffalo Trace, and then also some other ones that are probably more well known: E.H. Taylor, and then the Big Daddy George T. Stagg. So again, they don't talk about what exactly the mash bill is, but they do say it's less than 10%. Is the rumor 10% rye, so it's a low rye. Just like a lot of other products, not age stated, but rumors are it's 6 to 8 years old. And it's 90 proof, and again, the mash bill's undisclosed. But thank you, thanks for coming on. Thanks for bringing one of my favorite bourbons.
Cheers.
So, and now we'll get down to the important part. Where Jason is supposed to be the guest, not the whiskey, but hopefully you're happy now. I'm here to make you happy. So,
you're doing all right so far.
So we'll start with Ray. Ray is actually, again, like you see the trend. We're in Ohio. He's an Ohio guy, so. Actually raised in Columbus, and actually an East Side guy. Graduated from Columbus East High School in 1997.
Clarification: I'm a West Side guy.
Oh, West Side, sorry.
I'm a West Sider, but I went to East High School.
Oh, there you go. Okay, no, sorry. That's important.
Different.
That's
very
important.
Different.
He had to throw that down. He's like West
very
Side.
Different.
He was throwing
Side.
some West Side stuff in there. So I had that mixed up.
I started up gang signs before we
Yeah,
started this. So
I tried to pretend like we're the same age. I was like, "Oh, that's close to me." And you were like, Ray's like, "How old are you?" And I was like, "I'm about to turn 50." And then I started doing the math. I think you did. I was like, "Yeah, I graduated from high school in '90." So It's close. The same decade.
Couple
right?
years. Yeah, it's close.
Close. Yeah. It was already.
Those young guys are calling us both old. It don't matter.
That is true. That is true. We've had some old timers on here, but I feel like I'm always the oldest one. It's all right though. So Ray did grow up in Columbus. Actually, unlike a lot of the guests that have been local here, he actually went active duty first. Joined the United States Army. Obviously, good choice. As a 13 Fox, which is Forward Observer, Forward Support. What was it? Was it Fire Support Specialist?
Fire
is the real
Specialist.
technical word for it. For many of you that know, there's another artilleryman in the room making some.
The thing you guys don't see is there's guys in the background doing some artillery, handing arm signals.
Yeah, we have another artilleryman back here that's having fun. And of course, for the people that are learning, he did basic and IT at Fort Sill,
Oklahoma. I did.
What did you think of Fort Sill? Be honest.
Ran down. I feel like Fort Sill was ran down. But what a great training environment where we did our call for fire out on the hills. There's one main hill out there, but a couple other cool places to do call for fire, which made it that cool. But the weather patterns are real similar to Columbus. It gets cold, just not with the cold snow. I was there till the end of December to do training, so I'd say real similar to Ohio, but nothing else really there.
And so shout out to one of my classmates. He's I don't know if he's in the group, but he's not. But he's actually on his way out to be the commanding general of
Fort Sill,
the fire center, I think. So about to pin on his first star here soon. So pretty awesome. Shout out to Shane going out to Fort Sill. My impression of Fort Sill. Hated it. No, when I was in Dallas, our Grand Prairie was my reserve unit. That's where we mobilized people out of, and spent like 3 years of my AT up there. It was not my favorite place. It is the training area wise. It's huge. It's kind of, like Fort Hood. It's kind of right. Have you been to Fort Hood ever?
Yeah,
very similar with all the. It is. Yeah, the training area size is pretty.
Well, let's be honest. Most Army bases, or they're not even bases, they're posts. Most Army posts are not in the most. They're not in great areas.
Yeah, they suck.
Yeah, they kind of suck. You could
use that word suck.
They get the cheap property away from anything good. When I was at Fort Stewart, it was about 45 minutes from Savannah, so that was good. But yeah, most army places that I've been to have not been good at all, to say the least.
And of course, if we're talking the Air Force people, they
have
they know.
Yeah, they know. They have great places. They stay in hotels.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. And then the Navy travels to all the other countries, and they get to see all the other locations. So,
yeah, but they can't say they're in the Army though, which is pretty important.
Well, there's a reason that if you join the Army after you've been in the Navy or the Air Force, you have to go back to basic training. There's a reason for that. I'm just saying.
I don't know how true.
No offense to my Army or Air Force brothers.
It might be true. Yeah. We'll fact find that later, but it sounds awesome, right? That sounds like definitely a thing. No,
I'm just saying it's a fact.
So, as Ray just alluded, he actually after graduated from AIT, went to Fort Stewart, served in the 3rd Infantry Division. I spent a little bit of time at Stewart for warfighter exercise. Went with the 82nd. We all went there with the 3rd ID was part of it, and then 101st. So it's glad I wasn't stationed there. So, yeah, Stewart was my favorite either. Now that I think about it, I didn't like any other place except for Fort Bragg, and I really wasn't there that much.
Yeah,
and I don't even know if I like Fort Bragg. I just like being the 82nd. I think that's that comes down to it. I think that's
I mean, like if anybody's been in the 3rd ID, you know that they called us the dog-faced soldier, Rock of the Marne. You're like, you're Rock of the what? Like Rock of the Marne, you're a dog-faced soldier. And, the post is super small and the training area is so big at Fort Stewart because it's a armor. So, there's tanks and light mech. So Bradleys and
armor,
M1s, driving around there. So they have to have somewhere to train. But I did enjoy doing land nav at Fort Stewart. I got some cool stories about that, but I did meet some of the coolest guys that I served with at Fort Stewart.
Yeah, and all joking aside, 3rd Infantry Division, huge history in the military. In the past and also in the current climate, they've done some amazing things. And the funny story about 3 ID for me is I was actually graduated from my captain's career course was at CASQ, and then they're getting slotted to go after your school. And the branch manager at the time came up to her talking and said, well, my former battalion commander when I was a 2nd lieutenant was actually a brigade commander at Fort Stewart. And he was like, he wants to, he's basically saying, hey, you can come here, good thing you'll be in command in a certain amount of months or whatever. And he's like, what do you think? And the guy was a major at the time, and I was like, sir, I want to go to Fort Bragg. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I don't want to go to Fort Stewart. He's like, well, I'll say his name. Colonel Schwartzman wants you to come to Fort Stewart. And I said, well, I don't want to go. And he says, well, I'm not telling him. You're going to call and tell him. So we called him, and I remember telling him I wasn't coming. He was so upset. I felt like I'd because he was kind of like, he was my first battalion commander.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was like, I don't know if it's a phrase that I use a lot. It was like my golden ticket. Like, I think as you're in the military, if you do the right thing, there are golden tickets that are out there. And I felt like going into my first assignment after a captain, to use my, golden ticket would be the thing. But I feel like we talked about it years later, but I mean, I was close to going there. I was close to, probably commanding. Thank God I didn't. I went to the 82nd. So happy about that. Sorry, Colonel Schwartzman. I'm sure you're over it now. If not, you need to. It's been like 20 years. So you'll be okay. So after that, what's interesting is you'll see is what's really cool. I didn't put it out online, but Ray has a pretty interesting career. So he started off as an enlisted guy.
I did.
One of the few people I've met that actually, as we talk about it, he's checked a lot of different blocks. So left active duty, came back home to Ohio, like all you Ohio boys seem to do.
Fortunate or unfortunately, yeah. I should have went to Florida. I'm just saying I should have went to Florida. But the majority of my family was here, so I came back. And this is home for me. It'll always be home for me. So that's why I came back.
So you enlisted for 3 years initially, or 4?
Yep.
So when you initially enlisted, was that the plan 3 years, or were you looking to go further?
Well, so man, I tell you, I've had so many good mentors in the military, in the Army. And there's a guy named Staff Sergeant Colbert, and I think he retired as a first sergeant off of active duty. But anyway, he told me, he brought me in, and he's like, hey, nobody could pronounce my last name. He'd always called me V. I was training to go to Ranger School and go to the 101st to go air assault. So I was training up, getting ready. I was going to re-enlist. I was going to go to Campbell so I could be closer to home. And he's like, hey. And he's like, LT, give me your LES. And he showed me an LES, and he made like 4 times the amount that I did. I'm like, this dude is like 2 years older than me. Just because he has college finished, he makes 4 times as much. I'm like, all right, like something's got to give here. So anyway, he made sure that I re-enlisted into the National Guard back in my state. He's like, go home. If you want to come back, do all the cool things as an officer, come back and do them. Right. He's like, but go home. So anyway, that's why I decided to go home and pursue going to college, So
came back, there's a local, like many places, a local community college, went to Columbus State, got your associate's degree there. It's health related or exercise related. So associates in sport and exercise studies.
Yep.
Right. And what was cool about that, we'll talk about now, but he's pretty famous there because he was inducted into the Sports and Exercise Studies Hall of Fame in 2011. So I'm hoping to go down there. There's a plaque of you, like
there is.
Town.
Yeah. There's a wall. There's about 67 to 70 people inducted into Hall of Fame. And I tell you, that program is probably one of the top health and sports science programs in the country. And the guys that work there are absolute pros. And it's funny because you're probably going to talk about me going to Capital University after. And I don't really stay connected to anybody at Capital except the one girl that I went to Columbus State with and my advisor, and that's it. But the guys at Columbus State, there's so many people at Columbus State that I stay connected to because they are so like just the camaraderie, the fellowship, and just such a good program. So anyway, but yeah, I went to Columbus State and pursued health and sports science because, that's what dumb jocks do. And so, yeah, man. So I did that, and then I transitioned over to Capital to finish my degree. And, the only reason I really wanted to finish a 4-year is so I could be an officer and hopefully go to flight school.
Right.
So that was the only reason that really pushed me to.
He's throwing out nuggets right there. So everyone, the quote, flight school, I think we might be talking soon about you becoming a helicopter pilot, I think. But no, so he did talk about it. He went to Capital, which is also close to here. I was going to say you probably weren't going to talk much about Capital because it's awful. School colors, the purple. It's awful. That's
school colors are terrible.
It is bad. It's like super purple. It's like if you're into purple, go to Capital. It's cool.
Yeah.
But no, and then I'm actually a former student of Columbus State myself. So I actually, when like you, what he didn't talk about is Ray actually he was actually also, he got his associates at Columbus State, and then he went to Capital. He got his undergraduate and also got his MBA from Capital as well. I already had my MBA when I moved here, and I had a few semesters left on the GI Bill, so I went to Columbus State to do a couple, try to knock out a couple marketing degrees, like a couple classes. So if I'd have known you then, I would have been able to walk over to the Hall of Fame. Could have thrown your name around a little bit.
You should have,
cool. Yeah. No, it's a good program. I always thought it was pretty exciting. It's definitely. I mean, I a little bit older than you, so a little bit different. A different idea of community college. Like when I was growing up, if you went to community college, it was normally that you didn't have the grades to get into normal school or the money or things like that. But the Columbus State program is pretty well known.
And I did. And I did. You're talking to you're right. You're talking to a dude that spent 5 years in high school. Like I literally barely made it out of high school.
But he's West Side. Remember, he's like West Side. Or
That's
whatever,
not the way you do it. You just put your fingers up in the middle.
No,
you twist them in the middle.
I can't be doing it because I'm not really a West Side guy. I can't really throw it out. But and he's actually being super. Like he's pretending like he's not a smart guy. He's probably distracted by some other things, but to get you so a question I had about that was school. Did you use the GI Bill?
I did.
Okay.
I used that. I used federal tuition assistance.
Yeah.
And I'm actually looking to use the VOC rehab program now that I'm out, and that's a whole nother conversation. We didn't really talk about that yet, but yeah, I used the GI Bill. I had to college, like whatever they gave me for college for doing my enlistment. And then the Ohio National Guard was really good. They paid a lot of money.
Yeah. And we talked about that in the pre-interview. It's like I make fun of a lot of stuff to do with the VA, but the educational thing absolutely has been pivotal. I use that to get my MBA. It's a great stepping stool for people out there. If you have young kids that are not sure what they want to do, for the love of God, send them in the Army, let them get the post 9/11 GI Bill, and then set them on their way. But it's been very beneficial. If you haven't used those benefits, if you're a veteran, you should. Even if you had, like I told you before, I already had my master's degree, and it was why waste something that's free, right?
Yeah.
To go out and a different experience, get some education. It was good. That was awesome. So all this is going on. Like he already alluded to, we're going to go into the next stage of his military career, which is actually 2004. You decided or got selected to go to officer candidate school.
I did.
So went to officer candidate school, and then, as we've already alluded, he was selected to become a Black Hawk pilot, right?
I did. And there was a whole process behind this. So, And you and I didn't talk about it, but I was in my last year of college. So for my undergrad, and so I went to OCS, and then I still had it wasn't going to be another year until I finished college. So in the meantime, I go back from OCS. They commissioned me. Yeah, please. So they commissioned me as a second lieutenant, and I tell the artillery guys, because they sent me to artillery because I wasn't qualified to do anything aviation. Didn't take the flight aptitude test, didn't take the flight physical, didn't do any of that. And I said, hey, look, I need some time to figure this out. Let me finish school. And in the meantime, good, bad, or different, I went and put a flight packet together. I had already had LASIK because that qualified me. I didn't know the biggest reason is because I didn't have good vision. And they had, in the early 2000s, the Army admitted people with LASIK to go to flight school. So I did that, and then put all my packet together, did the flight aptitude test. And when I did that, nobody knew who I was because most of the guys that go aviation are from aviation. And so anyway, nobody had me on their radar. Nobody knew about me or anything. And I go in and I did really well on the flight aptitude test, to the point where, like, the same week I was in the colonel's office, the Fulberg Colonel SAO, the state aviation officer, I was in his office that week getting interviewed to go to flight school. So like I scored so high, and granted, math's my thing. If it would have been an English test, I probably would have bombed it. But yeah. So anyway, next thing you know, I'm in my last semester, and this is January, February, the end of February. In March, I get a call saying, hey, if you can be at flight school in 2 weeks, it's yours. If not, you might not get into flight school for 2 years because we only have 2 slots a year. to send guys to flight school.
Right.
And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah. So I had 4 professors that I had to go to all 4 of the professors to ask them if I could do like a distance learning. So I was at flight school writing papers on the weekends and doing homework at night to finish my class. I actually had my college graduation. I went home, walked the stage, went back that Monday. I had my first flight to go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it really worked out for me. It just right place, right time, you know?
And we were talking earlier, that wasn't your plan though. So is this the time the time when you were commissioned, you did you were doing the Gold Bar Recruiter, which is something that we haven't talked about here before, but that's it's a temporary TDY. So sometimes if you're commissioned early, you're waiting to go to basic or your officer basic course or something else, you can attach to schools where you could be a recruiter to recruit people in. And you did that Capitol for a little bit?
I did. And it was funny. A lieutenant colonel saw me and he's like, hey, Lieutenant. And I'm like, yes, sir. And I'll go over and salute the guy. And then he's like, what are you doing here? And I said, finishing my degree. And he's like, well, how are you a lieutenant? And I told him that I did OCS, a federal program through the state of Ohio. And he's like, you want to come work for me? I'm like, how? He's like, well, I'm gonna put you on orders. And I said, well, just so you know, I have to go to class during these times of these days. He's like, sure, I want you in my office. So I worked there for 4 or 5 months as a Gold Bar recruiter. Yeah, it was actually really great. It was a really great experience.
So did you recruit anybody in though? Did you sucker anybody into the Capitol ROTC program?
I didn't sucker anybody, but I was a good backup man for my boss, Major Gibson. Dude's awesome. But we had a lot of conversations with either parents or kids, and I feel like coming from the NCO Corps, I had a different take on what it was like to be in the Army, because I know what it's like to be at the end of a rank and be like, hey, for every detail that has to go clean the bathroom and take out the trash, like I was always at the end of so I knew what it was like to be a bottom feeder, and the conversation was just different, So I don't BS when it comes to that kind of stuff. So. And
you were enjoying the 01E pay at the time?
Maybe a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I'll hang out and take this paycheck.
So like for the people that don't know, like the 01 would be an officer, but then if you had enlisted experience, they would add AE to it and you would get even more money. It was always good for the enlisted guys that were like that before to be able to rub it into all the officers that said with the same rank and be like, I actually make, It was, if I remember, it was a little bit more. It was significantly more.
It was.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It's surprising, but it was. I think it was at the time for me. It was like $500, $600 more a month, maybe.
Probably,
which is crazy.
Yeah, I don't even. Remember
I can't remember either. It was so long ago. I can barely remember. I'm so old.
I'm so old.
I don't look at the pay scale now because I look at it and I'm like, how did I survive on that much money in today's world?
Those AGR guys and my friends on active duty, they act like they don't make a lot of money, but they take home a lot of money. Like I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's not a lot. But then when you see how much they take home, I'm like, you take home a whole lot of money, man. Like, yeah, they're getting a good paycheck, at least on the officer side of the house.
So I'm going to jump to, you just actually hit on something. I think we should talk about it now. You jumped really far ahead, but, what Ray is doing right now is he manages his own rental property business and that he invests in real estate. So you talked about you're making decent money. And one of the questions I had, and we're going to talk about it later, but I think you brought it up, so might as well talk about it now. So what is your thoughts? You said you were always invest in real estate.
Yep.
I was one of the active duty people who didn't do that. So I have friends that if they lived in Fort Hood, they bought a property, they lived in, then when they left, they kept that property and they kept moving. So what do you think of that as a property guy? Do you, instead of living on post, you buy a house at Carson, you move to Stewart, you buy another house and continue to manage those properties over your career?
Yes.
What's your thoughts now?
I highly recommend that. There was a guy that Jason and I worked with at the flight facility. He came off active duty, and he had houses, rental properties here in Columbus, but also at one of his duty stations. And I highly recommend that. If I was at Fort Rucker and I could replay what I did down there, I would have probably bought 2, 3, 4 condos down there to rent them out, because there's never going to be a lack of flight students going to Fort Rucker. Like they're just not, and unless they're going to shut down in the Army post wherever it's at, then yeah, the economy is going to go away. But I don't see them shutting down any Army posts anytime soon.
Just changing the names.
Yeah. So you're always gonna have a senior yes, they're changing the names, right? Yeah, I caught that a little slow. But yeah, so if there's a property and you're like, okay, it's a senior non-com or a young officer can afford that. Like, yeah, absolutely. And property's not going away. I bought property. I started buying properties in 13. And I think the last set of properties that I bought was in 19. And it just got too hot since then. Like it skyrocketed since then. But some of the properties that I bought have doubled in value since I bought them in 14. Like it's just wild at how much real estate's gone up. And, and it ebbs and flows. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. But if you hold them for, the course of the time it is to take to pay them off 15, 20, 30 years, depending on your term. You're looking at a significant value at the end of that.
If I could go back, I would. I was always the different, and I guess we have to, it's important. I guess we're educating because we have people that aren't in the military. So for some ranks, obviously, if you're like a PFC, depends on where you're at, E3 or something, you have to live in the barracks or on post. For what we're talking about, if you're an officer, a senior, and E6 or E5, it's certainly, I think like E4 in some places they were moving them off post. It depends.
If they're married,
it's been different. You're married,
if you're married,
but a lot of people will still, they'll rent and things like that. And at the time, I've had a couple of friends that they, I hope they listen. But Pete and Shelley, they were kind of big on buying the property, and I just thought that was interesting to talk about. It's a good opportunity it's a good market. It doesn't go away. It's always there. Fort Hood's still there. It may be a different name in a couple more years, but we don't know. But shitty Fort Hood will always be there, and people have to live there. So I just thought that was interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up about doing that. So that it's because we at the time there are a lot of benefits you have to be able to use that your VA for one house, and then also being able to have that income. You have an income that's always coming in there. It's not a job where you're getting to get laid off. You know what I mean? As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're not getting kicked out of the military. But I thought that was interesting. So.
Yeah, and I talked to some young guys about investing as well. And I've heard a lot of diversifying. In today's day and age, it is not, and I'm going to get a little bit preachy right here, but it's not the generation like our dads. My dad is in his 70s, and he might have made 35, 40 grand a year way back in the day, but he was buying a $50,000 house. The houses are 10 times that amount now. And you're trying to buy a house on the same wage that you made back then, that they made back then as you're making now. Like, it just doesn't work like that. And, and when people were like, hey, you need to diversify, and, there's so many ways to diversify now, whether it's crypto, whether it's stocks, properties, and, and I'm in the thought process of like, hey, I'm going to invest in real estate. And it's like, I could put a lot of money into crypto. I could put a lot of money into the stocks. But like, if investing into real estate is going to be my bread and butter, like that's what I'm going to put all my time, energy, and effort into, which I've done. And that's why I've grown my portfolio from one property to almost 20 properties. Right. And because of that, because I've just doubled down and I haven't been sidetracked with, crypto's going up. Like, hey, let me do that. And I could have maybe made some money, maybe, but like, I know that I made money in real estate, and there's nobody, like, if the market comes down, like I still have renters in that property. I'm still making a monthly cash flow. So like for me, and it's a safer play, and it's the long play. Yeah. So, and that's just, my thoughts on it.
Yeah. So, see, I never thought that when I was, when I was on, is I always thought the VA benefit, for the housing, I always thought was like, that's when you get out. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to, I liked living on post. For people that don't know, living on post, you don't have the electric bill. There's all these different things that there's a benefit of it. But as I look back, I was always like your GI Bill or your VA loan is for when you get out. When I look back and I was like, sheesh, I wish I had just bought one property like somebody. I think Pete probably told me that. I hate to admit it, but he probably told me you should buy a house. I'm like, no, dude, that's a waste of money. And obviously it's not. So I brought that. I thought that was a good point because you are in real estate and it sounds like you are mentoring younger people because you still have that baseline of military people talk. But if you are in the military, I tell people now is absolutely use that benefit before you get out. And capitalize on it.
Well, and the other thing is you can have more than one VA loan. Yeah. VA loans are not for investment purposes. However, if you're going from one place, you got to live there a year, right? So there are terms and conditions of having them. But you can have more than one VA loan out at a time, because think about it. If you're living in one place and you don't sell one house, you have to be able to open a VA loan to go to your next duty site, right? Or if you just want to keep that house and rent it out, like, yeah, it's going to stay in a VA loan. You're not going to change the term of the loan. You're like, no, because it's VA loans are too good to change. Why would you? Plus, why would you change it, right? So yeah, so you can open multiple VA loans. But it's not for investment purposes.
Per se. Don't say too much. We have a lawyer in the room. He's like blinking like you're saying too much. Like he's giving you the.
He's like, cut it off right there. Don't say anything.
Don't say anything further.
That's it. Stop.
Obviously, Ray has never used any rental properties with his VA loan for investment at all. So
I have not.
That's a disclaimer. We got a blink from the lawyer.
Yes,
which is good. But no, I didn't mean to like jump ahead, which is I just think it's like to go along with the conversation. It's fun to see that. I didn't know if that was going to come up, but yeah, it's pretty awesome it did. So now we're back to Ray. He becomes a Black Hawk pilot. So we got to make some jokes now with pilots. So what are the best Army pilots? Apache pilots, Black Hawk pilots, or Chinook pilots? Well, because there's a lot, and I'm sorry, and Kiowa. Well, I've got Kiowa.
Well, shit hooks are out. They just are. I can't mess with it. I have some good friends that are shit hook pilots. My roommate in flight school is Chinook pilot, but I think if I would have flown anything and Ohio wouldn't have had Blackhawks, I would have flew the Kiowa Warrior because I was a Fort observer.
Okay.
And doing call for fire and being close to the guys, ground support the ground guys and put some rockets up a bad guy's booty. I'm good with that. But I think, a lot of the Apache guys would talk shit, and it's really easy to fly racetracks. And I'm calling any of my Apache friends that are out here listening to this, but it's really easy to fly racetracks, miles away from the target than it is to drop dudes on the dirt right next to the bad
love
guys.
They turn on each other.
I'm just saying, like, you want to have some real balls. Why don't you land in the dirt? First off, land in the dirt on an unimproved surface with good guys in the back right next to a target. Like, they're like,
see, they turn on each other. It doesn't matter.
I'm just saying.
But pilots make fun of it. It's not a pilot. And then if you get a chance, they turn on other pilots as well.
Hog drivers.
But is it true though? Drivers. I think I've heard this. The Chinook is actually the fastest of them all.
It is.
So those guys can tell you, like,
I'm talking shit. Yeah, but
I think the Chinooks land in some pretty shitty.
The Chinooks are.
Yeah, I think it's those guys aside, but the Chinook has been.
It's a badass airframe.
Significant shit.
Well, it's a badass airframe. First off, let me the 160th, which is the premier aviation unit in the world. They fly them. It's one of their primary lift aircraft, and it's just an amazing aircraft. But it just doesn't fly as much as a Black Hawk. Like if you looked at total flight hours, just because they break more, there's like three main transmissions and like all kinds of other stuff that breaks on them.
I've been in there several times. It's leaking, and they're like, if it doesn't leak, I'm like, give me the fuck off.
I'm out of here. Yeah.
So I've jumped out of both of those.
Okay.
The Chinook is way better. Going off a ramp.
Oh yeah.
Going off a ramp is like the best thing. And also, it may be the experience. Maybe you would be much nicer, but if people have done it before in a Black Hawk, you're sitting there like you see in TV where your feet are hanging off. And then, I felt like that whenever I did it, the pilots like you guys felt like it was really necessary to bank for like 3.5 miles, so you feel like you're about to fall out.
You're sliding out. You're sliding off the edge.
But you have a parachute, but still you're like, dude, we do not need to be.
Out.
This aircraft does not to be banked. It can be done, but if I'm talking about, I don't know. I feel like the Chinook has done some pretty heavy shit over the past years, and then jumping out of one, the ramp jump is always pretty
I'm just talking shit. No, I like every airframe in the Army inventory. I like, and if I would have got put in a different airframe, I would have still been happy. Yeah.
So I watched. I don't know if you know. So like you were in the Ohio Army National Guard, so they have a certain number of aircraft. They don't have the whole. Do you guys have you don't have Apache?
No.
So you're limited to what you can fly, right?
Correct. And so at Rickenbacker, they used to have Kiowas, not the Warriors, just the Kiowa observation helicopters, and they had Cobras, which was Vietnam era type stuff. They had some Hueys as well. They actually retired the Hueys. I think, Jason, you might have been there before they retired them.
Did you ever fly in a Huey?
Yeah, and I actually got to fly.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Well, so all the Army aircraft now are all 2-pilot aircraft. So if you're not trained, to be one of those pilots. Like you can't ride up front, except, I mean, there's certain stipulations, like I'm not going to get into that, but for the most part, 99.9% of everybody can't fly. If you're not Blackhawk qualified, you're not flying in a Blackhawk.
Yeah.
But a Huey is a one pilot aircraft. And so like they could put a different person in the other seat. So as long as you're an aviator. So I actually flew a
cool.
Huey. Yeah. Which that thing's like a damn dinosaur flying around in the sky. No, I want nothing to do with a Huey.
I think I had to fly on that twice. Like I think one in ROTC and then once when I was at Fort Bragg for the, when we become officers from, and that's what we air assaulted. And I was like, and my dad was actually, in the first Cav division, it was a door gunner and a Huey, so that was actually pretty cool. But I talked to Ray a little bit about before. I would be happy never to step foot in another Army helicopter again in my life. It's fun. But if Jason promises to take me on a flight, which he said he would try to get me in, but if I take my dad, maybe I'll go one more time. But as long as do I need to get a different crew chief than Jason? That's the most important question. I mean, is he legit or do I need to get one of the, younger?
No comment. No. Actually, it's funny. I've actually flown with him.
They're pointing. So Jason, who's one of our guests, who's part of the team here, he's actually a Blackhawk crew chief in the first sergeant for the unit that they went. So I just was trying to pit it against it. So I know you guys have flown together, and that's pretty awesome. Just trying to embarrass you both a little bit there. They might fight after.
Not at all. We'll fight.
We'll fight
everybody else.
You did tell me you were super surprised that he made first sergeant. He wasn't that great of a crew
well,
chief.
No, I'm not surprised.
He told me you were awful.
No, well, I said he.
And so you made warrant, which we're going to lead to something else. Like
okay.
When you were a commissioned guy, you said you didn't know shit, but once you made,
I learned everything when I took the bars off. No, actually, what I said was I was surprised that Jason stayed in this long. I'm not surprised that he made first sergeant. I'm surprised that he stayed in this long because I figured he would have been like, the hell with this shit. I'm out of here by now. But now that he's had almost at 20 years, as he shakes his head, like, yeah, I'm almost done.
And his company commander is listening. He is super dedicated to his job. He loves it. He can't wait to do a solid 2 or 3 more years for you. Does that sound right, Jason?
Yeah.
No, but so you flew. So you came to you became a commissioned. I alluded to the commissioned aviator.
I did.
Did that so you see this what we talked about, but he's going to be pretty unique and but I don't know if I'm trying to think about how many people I've known that have been all in all three: a commissioned officer, a enlisted person, and a warrant. I think there's maybe like one I've met, and it of course was an aviator because there's some stories that go on of it. But Ray was a commissioned officer, flew, made it the rank of captain. So you'll see that actually on the screen he's retired as a captain. But actually, your last rank when you got out was a CW2.
CW2. Yep.
So we talked a little bit about that. What was the transition? So you can explain to folks that aren't in aviation,
sure,
why you go from captain to warrant officer.
So I transitioned. It was easy for me to transition because my full-time GS job was instructor pilot. So they hired me on to become an instructor pilot. And so one of the things that you have to do as a warrant officer in aviation, you have to track. And what that means is you have to pick one of 4 job fields. You have to be TAC ops, safety, maintenance, or instructor pilot. And so for me, I was already tracked. And me and actually there's another guy, Paul Tumanowski, that we were kind of racing because we were both captains and we wanted to revert. He was a maintenance guy, but there was a couple commission guys ahead of us that wanted to revert. And it was like, hey, the senior chief warrant officer was like, hey, I don't want your commission officer trash. And so when I went, I'm like, I was slightly nervous. And then it was like, no, hey, oh, you want Raychad? Oh yeah. Paul. Yeah. They both can come over and they can be warrant officers. So it wasn't like a thing where it's like, oh, you just get to revert because it wasn't like that at all. It was like, hey, you have a skill set that you can offer to the team. And like, so I came in as a CW2, which is low ranking as a warrant, but my flight skill set was that of a W4. So like they moved me right up to the company. Essentially, we had a company standardization instructor pilot, which just means you're a senior instructor pilot with a little more authority and a little more sign-off power. And so we had one guy and he's like, dude, you do it. Like, I don't give a shit. And he just kind of let me run it. And then I also moved to a battalion slot as a W2, which is a CW4 slot. as a instructor pilot, standardization instructor pilot. So the process, and so for me, it was kind of seamless. And the whole story behind why it even happened was because I had been platoon leader in a maintenance company, platoon leader in a flight company. I was a 24-month company commander. I went to brigade staff for 2 years, and then I was in battalion staff for like 2 years. And I went to my battalion commander, and I was like, hey, I got to have a Mike to Raychad. And he's like, yeah, man, what's up? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I need to revert or I'm getting out.
Right.
And I was at like year 15 or 16. I was just like, I can't take this anymore. I need to be in the cockpit. I need to fly. The staff job's not for me. And so that's when everything just started going that direction. And it really worked out for me because it really gave me job satisfaction again, because I was just the bureaucracy of the Army aviation leadership in Ohio it was terrible. And I just needed to get away from it. And I wanted to get to the flight company and fly with the boys.
Right.
And that's what I got.
I guess so. Like, again, we're talking about, I didn't mean to jump ahead. I know you did have a great career as a I'm not joking aside, but he did check all the blocks. And people that know, when you talk about the jobs as a commissioned officer all the way to company commander, those you check, platoon leader, all those jobs and staff and everything else. But I thought it was important to highlight the part that you became a warrant that handle all three, which is, all three of those things I think is super unique. Like I thought about that for the past week when we talked about it, and I'm kind of thinking like I can't even think of the last I've ever heard of that. You know what I mean? I think it was maybe an aviator, and I think I'm in artillery for some reason. So it was like an artillery guy that for some reason I remember hearing that. And I don't know. Again, I'm old, so I might have forgotten. But one interesting things we talked about. So now I get to corner you again on another.
Oh shit!
Your thing. So who are better pilots, commissioned officers or warrants?
Man, come on. we hear from the background. Warrants. Any other takes on warrants? Yeah, we got emojis. Warrants by far. And granted.
Now explain that. There's a joke. There's a joke that people know, but like honestly explain, like if you could, why that is.
It's just because it's the job of the warrant officer to be a tactical and proficient flyer, and that's it. And the commission guys, sometimes they get too wound up with a lot of the other things, and other things can just be a variety of things. And the warrants, when you have a flight company, you have like 3 commissioned guys, so a captain and 2 lieutenants, and like 18 to 20 warrants. So the majority of the flying is done by the warrants.
Right.
Once you're out of a flight company, like you're kind of like a second thought, like where it's like, you're in battalion staff. Oh, we'll fly you when we can get to you. Oh, you're in the maintenance company. We'll fly when we get to you. So it's pretty much on you to maintain your proficiency. But like the warrant, well, and the other thing is majority of the warrants all have the additional flight instruction, like are the instructor pilots and the maintenance test pilots, not the commission guys.
Right.
So, but I'll tell you that I flew with a lot of good commission guys in Ohio. Fortunately, at least for our state, that there's when guys and gals come home from flight school, there's a minimum flight hour requirement of 96 hours per year. So you have to fly 48 hours per half year based on your birth month. So you're still getting at least flight time and flight hours. So in the flight facility has to support that.
Right. Yeah.
So you're getting flight time, but like as a warrant, I was flying 200 and I wasn't flying 96 hours a year. I was flying 200 to 250 a year, So I was.
So all joking aside, I was making a joke because a couple of my classmates are Army aviators, officers, and one of them we hope to have on someday would definitely disagree with you that he could outfly the Black Hawk.
I
know him. I might put him up against you. That's it. Colonel Brayman, I'm on your side. You could outfly him 100%. So
I say bring that shit.
I'm telling you, be careful. You talked about it. You talked about
put some money on it.
You talked about a elite aviation unit. He spent a lot of time there, and I'm bragging about it in the past couple months. Another one of my classmates is actually aviator. about the pin on. It got selected to be a general as well. So
good.
I'd put him up against you anytime. And he's old like me too. I think he'd stop fly though. I don't think he had to get LASIK like you.
Well,
I mean,
you know, but
like,
you lose your touch when you get old, man. I'm just saying. I'm still I'm still in my mid 40s.
Matt, we have a challenge. Come on, you got to be able to pull some strings to come down here.
I'm just saying.
And put into this house. But no, it's always a fun thing. And the reason I brought up is all the fun. I think one of the things, if you've been watching, and if you're not in the military, but if you're in the military, it's always fun to poke fun at each other. Is the way to do that. And the one thing he did mention is most of the time the warrant officers are flying a lot more than the commissioned officers. So, and I've actually I was actually in Afghanistan with a warrant check pilot and a first lieutenant taking us somewhere, and it did not go well for that.
Well, and I'll tell you,
it did not go well for anyone in that aircraft.
Well, I'll tell you, but I've also been in an aircraft where I was a captain, instructor pilot with W-2s, and it did not go well for any of them. It did not go well for any of them either.
Yeah, we were going to like recon this area to put in a FARP and a forward armament resupply point. I have it right. It's been a while, but so we took like 3 or 4 Blackhawks in, and I was on Blackhawk with a Army first lieutenant and a CW4, and they were quick enough to let us know there was a check flight for the lieutenant, and we went in to land, and they browned out, they dusted out, and they took off, and we were able to listen, and the warrant was really cool. The first time he's like, hey, listen to your crew chief in the back, look at your instruments, like just put this thing on the ground, you're not going to see it, and we could hear if you've been in there, we had the headsets and they're talking, the crew chiefs in the back telling us, all the way down 10-5, and it's pulling out, and we come back in for the second time. So, and if you've never been in there, all the Blackhawks, then even if the other ones landed, they all take off again, they come back around, and we're sitting there, and it's funny. That's when we start covering up the microphone, being like, "Oh my God, thank God!" And we come in, and the lieutenant browns out again, and we're just like, "Oh my God!" And now it started getting more serious, and this warrant is getting like was on him, like, hey, you need to land this aircraft. Do your fucking job. Listen to the people. And it was, and we noticed that like they started messing with the communication stuff where we couldn't hear them before, but there was still some talking going on, a lot of pointing. Yeah. So we can imagine what was happening. And then we actually came in for the 3rd time, and he did not land the aircraft. And when he pulled out, the last thing we heard, and then it went blank, is the CW4 was like, I have control of the aircraft, and then they switched to some stuff, and there was like the one-handed. He was actually in the left side, so one-handed pointing, screaming about this, and then the crew chief were like, "How bad is it?" And the crew chief is like, he's like, "Oh God, this is not good." And of course, he landed. Then he literally looked over at this lieutenant and said, "That is fucking how you do it. Exactly how you do it." And then like we were just like, can we go to a different Blackhawk? Because I don't know if I want. You
guys are scaring me.
No,
I'm tired of going around.
But it's. I guess you've been there. I've never been there, but I can understand it. I mean, you have someone that's probably had thousands of hours at that point. Someone who hasn't, and it's. In my time frame, I don't remember like until going to Afghanistan where you saw those. I guess in Hood a couple times, but in Bragg, but not like the conditions I saw in Afghanistan where it's like total brownout. So,
yeah, you can't. It's so hard to recreate those conditions. Yeah. And I will tell you, the ultimate pucker factor is it's a whiteout, brownout condition, and it's really cool that Ohio and some of the other states that fly in snow actually created an approach. It's a steeper than normal approach. So instead of doing like a long drawn out where the dust, where you're going a little bit faster and landing, it's more of a steep approach, and you blow some of the dust out. And technique, I'm not going to get into that if anybody's wanting to, this technique, that technique, you can keep your
Matt,
technique.
You can swear more, Matt.
I'm just saying this is how we did it, and we didn't have any issues. But yeah, so anyway, one of the scariest moments when you lift off with a helicopter or land with a helicopter in a brownout, whiteout condition, you want to talk about 3 seconds of like, holy shit, I'm going to crash this thing. And then all of a sudden you see the ground and you're like, oh, get it on the ground. And it's like, you land that thing and you're like, thank God.
It's good to hear that, because if you've never been, like a lot of people have been, if you've been that, and the crazy thing, most of the time I was in the Blackhawk is you guys, everyone's under night vision, which is completely crazy. So talk about all the things you're talking about, and night vision is awful. It's probably got better.
Well, yeah, okay.
And I'm looking through stuff going like, I would have hit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna die. Like every time it's like.
And I love that
yeah.
Jason's shaking his head like, yeah. Well, yeah. So we're in Iraq and we're doing dust calls at night with our doors off. So our front doors are off. And so you can look because there's part of the door where you can't see the ground. And if you take the door off, you literally just turn your head just a little bit and you can see the ground. And as soon as you turn your head to the outside of the aircraft and you're like, oh, I'm in, you're browning out. Next thing you know, you just get peppered. It feels like a BB gun shooting you in the face. Just all the rocks from the ground are just peppering the whole side of your face. And you're like, holy shit. So you're like, right. So your door's open, you're looking on the ground. And next thing you know, you're just getting peppered with rocks in your face. And you're like, and not rocks, but like little itty bitty pebbles are just blasting you in the face. So yeah.
My friend Matt probably texted and said they didn't need to take the doors off to land it where he came from.
Oh, they're high speed.
No, I'm kidding.
High speed.
No, but it's good to hear that because there's many times you're in the back, like it's like you don't even want to really know what the fuck is going on because and I'm always, and the funny thing about you guys is most of the time you guys always express like the most no fear and like you had this going down. And I know there's a point in you to be like, holy shit, this didn't feel good.
Most conservative response.
They look back and they're always like, it's all good. And I'm just like, bullshit, man, because this is not, it didn't feel good to me. It didn't, obviously.
Hey, Jason, is that right? Most conservative response wins.
And I always use, it's funny because like Jason, I talked to Jason as a crew chief. That's the first person to look at. Like I was always like, if the crew chief's a little worried, then I should be worried. And like that's what I'm saying. When they look a little like, and they're just like, they're pale white, you're like, and again, goes back to my statement. It goes back to my statement. The only way.
Hold on, baby. Hold on.
The only statement goes back is I will never, unless my father, I can take my father, who's in his 70s now, on a military aircraft, a helicopter. That's the only time I'd ever get back on one. I stick with that statement. Never again. I think I've dodged a bullet.
If they called me and said, "Hey, we got zombie apocalypse, we have the war going on, Red Dawn situation, and we need you to come back," like I'm going back and I'm hopping in the cockpit. I'm just saying, like I have no problem flying right seat for whoever.
But you're in control. That's the funny thing about that. That's the thing that I love about that.
But I'm out of control.
Yeah, but,
if you only knew me, if Jason knows me.
Well, we know that. We know. That's what I'm saying. Is all these like if you've been in the military, you know that like most of the Army like everybody like the new thing is like Top Gun, right? Like everybody's like aviators. Or everybody knows right now. Top Gun, the new thing. Army aviators. You guys aren't too much off. You guys love yourself.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you party just as hard as we do. I mean, it's like, and we know you, and you're like, and then you know what I mean. Like you party. I mean, it's so I'm saying like you're wild just like I'm thinking, but you try to pretend like you're fearless, which you're not. I guess that happens to you have to. It's one of those jobs where, especially when a lot of people like the same thing with the airborne. Like you talk to most people. Like if you jumped out of an airplane. If you're airborne, a lot of people will tell you absolutely that they weren't scared. And I will tell you that you were full of shit. Like maybe the first 5 times, you're 5 times in airborne school, but the more you do it, like your experience, the more you do it, the more you see, the more you understand the bad things that can happen, the more you see the bad things that can happen. Dude, it's nerve-wracking. But the last thing you want to do is like when someone's like, are you scared to jump? Be like, yeah, I'm terrified, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, but I think aviators, you guys have mastered it. You're always like, we got this. It's no problem. And then, but you have the power in the back to turn off things. So you guys, I know you guys are like, holy shit! Like, can't believe we pulled it off. You know?
Well, I think it's a calculated risk, right? So yeah, so everything's calculated, and I think a lot of the regulations that were specific to Army aviation, not federal aviation, were written in blood. So like our predecessors and the guys that flew in Vietnam and anytime, even in early, OEF, those guys learned. So like one of the things that I'm not giving away at TTP because, guys are doing different stuff, but they were flying super low at the beginning of the war. And they realized like, hey, we're getting shot with small arms fire all the time. Right. Yeah. Well, then they're like, well, the IR threat is down because we have countermeasures to defeat it. So like, why don't we just fly higher and stay away from the small arms? Well, no shit. Why don't we do that? Right.
Yeah, so, you guys can't brag about like nap of the earth and being all like trying to scare us in the back, which I think is half the job.
I'll scare the shit. Well, I've scared the shit out of a lot of people. I've made quite
including yourself.
Jason's raising his hand. Well, I've made quite a few people throw up too. So just saying.
Notice you mentioned something again about written in blood. So we talked about, Jason had alluded to something before in a previous episode, and then we talked about it before. But you did actually, company commander, have some people that were involved in a Black Hawk crash in 2019, actually inside Balad Air Force Base in Afghanistan or Iraq. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And we talked about that before. So yeah, there's definitely with federal and military, I think like a lot of lessons learned. Obviously, unfortunately, people have perished because of mistakes or things that probably should change. And I talked to you briefly about that, and that was kind of a pivotal part in your career too, wasn't it? That you were company commander for a couple people on one of the Black Hawks, and if you want to talk about that some more, it's probably better than you do. Then I tell the story.
Sure. So Balad Air Base, September 19th, 2009. One of my aircraft, 272, piloted by Lionel Hamilton and Rob Diamond, went down on Balad Air Base. And so I won't get into there's a whole lot to the story, but I'll save you the details. But they were doing a training flight in combat, which is a no-go. Jason's laughing because he knows.
No, but don't hold back. This is what we talked about before.
Man, so
excluding that, because I didn't know what you talked about before, Jason. So what was the training mission that day?
So it was a gunnery that they were trying to qualify our guys for the next fiscal year. So when we got home, we didn't have to do it, right? And so I fought the battalion commander. I fought, and we had a brigade commander that wasn't even part of our state, but I talked to him and we had a great conversation. Like, all right, we're not doing it. And so anyway, the leadership team pushed these guys to do it. Thank you. And so they went and did it, and they knew a sandstorm was coming, and so they crashed the aircraft. And granted, like.
There were two aircraft. The one aircraft,
there was, yeah. So
the
second aircraft was Tom Rice and Kevin Hendershot. Yep, they went back to Warhorse, landed the aircraft, shut down. They were okay. Rob and Lionel crashed their aircraft, and I'm not taking away anything from those guys, because any given day, any of us can put an aircraft down. And so I will never talk shit, second guess, criticize those guys. Bad shit happens all the time. So anyway, they crashed the aircraft, total catastrophic loss of the aircraft. And a good friend of mine and Jason's, a guy named James Moore, got pinned underneath the aircraft. His lower, I think his right leg. He was one of the crew chiefs. Another guy named Shea Bayless got put out. He's had a lot of problems. He had a compound fracture on one leg, and his other leg was broke too. And so the aircraft came to rest on its side. And I think Tom Weinzier, a guy named Mike Strange from Charlie Company, which was our sister company in Indiana. And then, sorry.
And
then there's
I really appreciate telling the story, because this is kind of the things we talked about. And a disclaimer: these are things that we talked about before, to make sure it's like we're not ambushing anybody here, and it's. I appreciate the vulnerability, and honestly, these things have to come out, and I think that's pivotal to the mission of what you've done before, and I hope we talk about it soon. But thank you.
Sure. So sorry, gets me a little choked up, but there's a guy named Michael Cote that he died in the crash, and one of his friends, LaFontaine, from an Alaska 152 unit, he got ejected from the aircraft. So Mike Cote was actually just home and saw his baby daughter after she was born.
Yeah.
So anyway, the aircraft crashed. Michael died. Mike died. LaFontaine got ejected. He was in a coma. The other guys, I think, something happened. One guy caught a gun to the face. James Moore got pinned underneath the aircraft. Shea Bayless, which had a compound fracture on one leg, and his other leg was broke. He jumped out. He was on the side facing up, and he jumped out and tried to start digging James out of the aircraft with like a compound fracture in his leg. Like, dude's just an absolute warrior. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that happened, and the leadership team tried to essentially kind of cover it up. And so they sold it, and you should have saw when they came to talk about the crash investigation. So first off, the guy that investigated the crash, was best friends with our battalion commander. Like they went to flight school together. He's one of his best friends. And I'm like, okay, there's not a little bias there.
But they come from Rucker though?
Yeah, he came from Rucker. Well, yeah, the
so
guy's name's his name's Herman Valentine.
Yeah.
I call him out, and they
Herman.
Sorry, Herman, I'm calling you out, dude. But yeah, so he's like, hey, this thing happened, and then they back briefed everybody, and the 152 guys were like, bullshit, like we fucking know better. Yeah. This is bullshit. Oh, you should have saw those guys in the room. They were ready to rip the battalion commander's head off because the leadership team pushed these guys to go do a bullshit training mission in combat.
But not to defend Herman or anybody, the chain command, but I just feel like it's important to say we all have always pushed the envelope. You know what I mean? So it's very hard in the chain of command when someone tells you to do something. And also like that I think one of the early episodes we talked about a Black Hawk crash where, in my mind, it's easy for everybody to say like the pilot should have said no. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to vote to stand up and say no, I'm not doing this, or they should have went back to this fob instead of that. And that's the hard part about it is like in like the thing about everybody in the military is like we have gigantic fucking egos, man. Like it's a true thing. So like so all those times like you can say, hey, someone's doing that, but.
Well, so the thing is that I would agree with that. I agree with what you're saying, but when you listen to the audio of the black box, and then the black box verifies what you think and not what they say, it's two different things. So like, they wanted to they wanted to crucify Lionel, which is a good friend of mine. He's one of the best dudes you'd ever meet, right? Jason shaking his head.
I'm not laughing that somebody just posted a comment that's important.
Someone wanted to know your
no, they can know you are.
I see that.
And it is a balance. I mean, there's like I thought like it's funny when you talk about it. It's Jason did mention before, and then you talk about like there was a lot of and Jason elaborated more and not to. I just want to know more about it so I can. It's kind of understand. But there was a lot of different people on this aircraft. There was the guy that passed away was actually an active duty guy. Yep. But they were out there doing gunnery, which is
right because typically you're not going to have an aircraft full of crew chiefs. They're all crew chiefs.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. Is if you research this, there was a lot of people in the aircraft that normally. Probably shouldn't have been.
There's usually only two crew chiefs on every aircraft, and usually it's only one crew chief and one door gunner that's a non-qualified non-crew. It's a qualified non-crew member that is just essentially manning a gun. Yeah. And so you usually don't have that many guys. So and they were actually at a gunnery range down in near Baghdad when they were coming back, and they saw the weather, so they hauled ass back. Yeah. Yeah.
No, and that's what I thought. Just bring it because there's some things I was kind of trying to understand, like a training mission, how many people, especially from different. Jason was explaining to me earlier about all these people, and then I was like, "What are you doing?" They explained gunnery. That totally makes sense. Someone decided to take a couple Blackhawks, and I heard there was other iterations that were supposed to go out and qualify, and it's a delicate balance. I mean, it's always. I mean, I'm not defending anybody, not to try and upset you, but
no,
it's always a delicate balance to do your job, maximize training, maximize the opportunity, and I think what a lot of people forget in the military is even the people outside don't know, but the people that are in it, how much risk we're at when we're doing some basic things that a lot of people don't understand. It's kind of like, oh, hey, Friday, I'm going to go jump out of an airplane. This is totally normal. Hey, don't worry about honey. But there's so much risk involved. You're like, oh my gosh, not only like paratroopers, there's now an Air Force aircraft, like there's all these things that you're just like, that's like going to Kroger to get,
it's normal Army day.
Yeah. And I think that's the funny thing about it is like, that's the funny thing is all those guys, I hope, I know you're not criticizing them and you have a right to, that everyone has their opinion and it's tragic. It's one of those things I think I had a good friend of mine, I think I told you about before, or a guy where I don't know if we're good friends anymore, but he actually was involved in a Black Hawk crash in 1999 in Korea. And both of the pilots were killed and he was seriously injured. So was the commanding general. He was actually aide de camp at the time. And the funny thing is like researching what you had told me and then what Jason told me before we went on the air, I looked at it and there's actually one of the guys who was involved in the crash. He's actually became a first sergeant, I think, in Alaska. And he had talked about what was funny about the whole article that you read is when he was he remembers everything happened. He said, remembers the aircraft hitting on the right side and then waking up and thinking it was a bad dream. and then coming to eventually being treated by a female medic at Balad, and they said that he said all he needed was icy hot for his back, and he ended up,
having a broken
back,
Oh, wow.
fractured skull,
Oh, wow.
scratched cornea, and you talked about the guy you talked about with a fractured leg, jumping out of the aircraft to rescue someone, and one of my close friends, my goddaughter's father was involved. The special forces guy was involved in the C-130 crash, and it tells a very similar story. He had a very bad leg injury, and that was the first thing he thought about was to get up and help everybody else. And it's crazy. I think I was looking when I hear that, it's sad, and it's sad, but it's also like what we do. It's like I said before, I think a lot of people in the civilian world think it's normal. They think if we're not fighting in Afghanistan, right, it's safe. Unfortunately, it's not. A graduate from my school, Marine Corps aviator, was just involved in an Osprey crash past few weeks and lost his life. So it's a high risk job. Everything we do, whether it's flying a helicopter, jumping out of airplanes, working on, everything we do is high risk.
Yeah.
So.
One of my good friends that I went to the instructor pilot course, Scott Landis. Yeah. He was deployed to Kosovo, came home to see his dad. His dad was on hospice, saw him, and he was going to fly his ashes over his house in a civilian airplane. Plane stalled on takeoff, crashed and died, and so like, any given day could be our day.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the things we talked about before. Is like, I think you saw with Ray. Thank you for being candid about it and emotional. These are the things that we've talked about with, why I started doing this is to get veteran stories. These are things that we, this is how many years ago? Close to 15 years, 13, 14 years ago. And it's something that you still don't forget. It's still raw.
It's seared.
You can see like Ray holds that. And that's a lot of things about what's happened to a lot of us is, it's easy to say, like, I get over it. It's time heals. It doesn't always. We always remember. Unfortunately, I think we remember the worst of things sometimes, and I think that's
sometimes. But I tell you, I remember a lot of really good sunsets in Iraq. Holy smokes, a lot of good sunsets, a lot of cool missions. Worked with a lot of good fellas doing a really cool mission. And we had a lot of fun. I do remember that. But when you're so stressed, you come back from a war zone and you're sideways, and you're worried about the shit that happened, right? Because that's like all you can pay attention to. But being removed from it from that long ago, like still talking about Michael Cote, talking about Mike still kind of gets me choked up.
No, and I think we thrive for it. I think you said something that's funny to me is like. The thriving for it, like everybody, we're all adrenaline junkies in a way. It doesn't matter anybody that signs up for the military. There's something right about you, but something wrong. I've always said.
well, people that go in the military usually have some kind of childhood trauma that leads them into the military.
I'm always trying to explain this to people. It's like I think our wiring is different. I don't want to say always
absolutely
trauma, but
there's different,
and that's a good way.
You ever been to an infantry company?
Yeah, there's something right. There's something right, and there's something wrong, and
and the FOs too.
But it's the same thing. If you talk about, there's a lot of people in the group now that are firemen, police officers. It's the same thing. They're wired. They're and don't take it the wrong way. I struggle with that actually. I struggle with my wiring of how I wanted to do those things. I wanted to put myself at risk, and I didn't really give a fuck about anything other than what my job was in the Army. I loved it. I wanted to do it. I was always striving. If I found out, I think you feel the same way. If you would have been a pilot, right, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and they picked another pilot to fly, would you be pissed?
Yeah.
And if you know all the risk, that's what they understand. Like, you'd be absolutely pissed off, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is like that's the mentality is you always want to be the tip of the spear.
And that's why we do the job that we do. That's why you stay in for the years, and that's why you learn after the first little bit. It's not about the college tuition or because you went to ROTC. You learn that it's about the selfless service. It really is a big piece of why that's the piece. And I don't care what you say, like that has to be part of why you stay in for the long term to get a 20-year retirement's great and all, but like there has to be some part of you that has selfless service in your heart.
Well, I think
to
from the
keep you,
I don't think it's
for
been
that
20
long
years.
haul.
I think it's from the very beginning for
Oh,
some of the
yeah.
raise their right hand and do what they to do. We have
Yeah.
been honestly, not joking, so I've been blessed to do it. Like that's what I'm saying is like it's this is why I think it ties into what's going on with the epidemic, and I want to talk about the next state,
Yeah.
or the next part of your life, which is what is important about it. Is why I started this a few months ago. I kick myself every day for not starting earlier, but to help that one person that decides that suicide's the option to get out of this, and that's what's crazy about like all these things you're talking about. Like we that's why I say the wiring is wrong, right? Because I still feel like I felt like when I was 20 years old. If something happened today, I feel like I could just be like, I'm going to just answer the call. If I had to run probably a mile right now, it wouldn't be good.
You die.
I probably make it. I think, but it's a struggle. I think that you talked about, and you did this. You did this for 2 years, and this is a newer venture for this. But you were. What I'm alluding to is Ray was actually for 2 years was the executive director for Save a Warrior, which is a veteran-run nonprofit organization that offers holistic approach to returning veterans and active duty service members to help heal with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts like that. So why I've been most excited to have you on is for that. This is why I started this. And, for 2 years, you put your money where your mouth is. And if I thanked you before, I really, truly want to thank you now for that 2 years of being on the front line to try to stop that, and is what we're trying to help here and try to understand why we can go through some of the most horrible things you talked about and then decide to come back and the static is gone, I'd say, but we decide that we don't want to do this anymore and we have to stop it. So,
yeah.
And you were propelled to do that. One of your close friends committed suicide, right?
Yeah, actually, it was for a couple reasons. So, so my best friend, Will Grover, and to any of my friends that are watching this, we're also good friends with him, the guys in my neighborhood. Just an awesome dude. He killed himself when I was 21, and it absolutely broke my heart. And years later, after the bad stuff that happened in Iraq, I was pretty sideways after Iraq. So a guy that I went to OCS with, Officer Candidate School, that was a leadership course. That was $1 million. Jake likes to describe it as $1 million leadership course. Shut up, quarter up your ass, one at a time. And I tell you what, man, that leadership course kicked our ass for 59 days. But we come out of it, and I stayed connected to these guys. And back in 2004, all we had was leader books that had emails and phone numbers and stuff in it. So anyway, I stayed in contact with this dude, and he had his own struggles. And we were talking about that scandal that happened in California while they were doing the pay thing. So anyway, he was a captain in the California Guard, and he's like, I went out to California with a good friend of mine, Eddie. We were going out to see a Dodgers-Lakers game. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm coming out to L.A. Like, I'd like to see you. So he picks us up the one night. We go to a Dodgers game, and he's like sitting here telling me, like, hey, man, you should come out. I just started this program. It's the Warrior Meditation Foundation, a.k.a. or DBA, ran under Save a Warrior. I'd love for you to check it out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, man, I got this, but like, let's talk about we're right behind
the Dodgers game.
Yeah, like we're right behind home plate. We got great seats, and I'm like, dude, let's talk baseball. So anyway, he keeps talking, and he talks about petting a pony, and I'm like, what are you talking about petting a pony? Well, he's talking about equine therapy, right? So right, and that was equine therapy, aka pet the pony, right? So anyway, I go out. That was like April. So I go out and I go through cohort 007 of Save a Warrior. And so this is, and by now they have 140 cohorts now, all the years later, but it was in its infancy state, but he had already dug down and found some really good healing modalities. So we did equine therapy. We did high ropes, low ropes. We did labyrinth walks. We did mandalas. We did childhood trauma, and then we unpacked some films that talked about the hero's journey. And I just gave away pretty much what was a 5.5-day program. Now, actually, so it's had a bunch of different variants that were all about the same. So anyway, Jake and another good friend of mine, Adam Carr lives in Dublin. Jake actually moved from California to Ohio.
West Side.
West Side. No, he is actually out in New Albany. Good for him. He lives in a real nice neighborhood in New Albany. I'm like, and I'm driving out there. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like,
New Albany is not.
This is where y'all rich folk live. I'm gonna buy me one of these houses. But yeah, no. So he was out there, and so anyway, the organization had a guy gave them a property, and they're down in Hillsborough now. And the DAV is supporting them. They actually have funding so they can support it with the staff that they need. Because when we were doing it, I mean, he was paying me diddly and shit, and we were doing it. I mean, not for fun and for free, but like we were rubbing nickels together to try to put cohorts together. Yeah, and we were only able to run one a month, and we'd probably run 10 a year because we only had the funding and the staffing for that. Now they're doing 2 a month.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they've leaned it out. They've taken some of the stuff out of it. They've leaned it down to about 3.5 days. Don't quote me on that. Sorry, Jake, Adam, if that's off. But
is Jake in the group though? Is Jake in the group?
What do you mean?
Is he in boards with Patriots? We have to add him.
No. He's actually he's like 20 years sober or something like that. So he's not a drinker. But
no, but this is the
I know. I'm just talking shit. Yeah. But I'll invite him and Adam to him. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know what? He'd be one guy that you want to talk about being a great guest speaker. Him and Adam both would be great guest speakers to talk about that program and talk about it because so essentially it's free for law enforcement or for any kind of law enforcement, firefighter, anything like that, or any type of first responder or military veteran. Right. Yep. Everything is anonymous. So like, even if you're still in the military and you need to go see some mental health, I tell you what, this is one of the most impactful, it's one of the most impactful, life-changing, mental health changing programs that you've ever been to.
Okay. And so we'll look at that if you could, Ray, to post that in there to get the veterans to be involved in that. I think
singlewarrior.org.
I think wow, this is like a well-oiled machine now. I'm so proud. You haven't seen what's going behind. We have a lot of going on. No, but it is, and I joke aside, like a lot of stuff we talked about, like to be a veteran is super important to me. Also, what this mission now is to fix or try to rework our wiring so that we don't think that suicide's the option is super important to me. Like you're my brother, you're my sister for serving, but Ray, we just met tonight. The 2 years you did, I hope someday this group can do that same thing where it makes an impact to people that really matters, and I think that's more important because we come home and we sometimes need our circuits rewired. I'm not. My wife hates when I do analogies, but like I don't think I'm normal, right? I don't like. Do you think you're a normal guy?
No.
Yeah. So I think that's.
Well, I look at you and I can see abnormal right away. I can see that right away. No, I'm kidding. But seriously,
I mean, his beard is a little bit darker, mine's a little bit longer,
a little bit grayer.
I mean, I feel like I've been trying to show the jacked arm a little more than him.
Yeah,
sucking it a little bit.
He's like, but no,
I'm way fucking older than you. I feel I'm trying to like
you got 6 years on me.
I know, but I just look at the whole thing of. I thank you for your service. I also thank you for those the 2 years that you're involved in the program. And I can still see and just it's hard to explain. My coping mechanism is humor, make jokes, but just to see the emotion in you, to feel the emotion is huge. So,
Well,
Josh is going to post some stuff about that, and thank you truly from the bottom of my heart.
well, thank you. And I want to thank Jake Clark. I want to thank Jake for putting me in a position, because being in the executive director role helped me process the shit that I was going through. Because as Jason knows, I was sideways when I came back from Iraq. Like I had some suicidal thoughts. My wiring was not right. My thinking was not right. And, to go from that guy that was angry, sometimes suicidal, depressed, and just really sideways, to going, it's like this, right? So it's like sometimes you're in life, you're surviving, sometimes you're striving, and sometimes you're thriving, right? And that striving, the thriving is a lot of where people want to be. But when you're in that survival mode, which you're in a hole, and whether it's because you're medicated, because you can't function in all the things, right? All the guys, and nobody is free from trauma, right? All the first responders that are doing it on a daily basis, you guys see more shit than I've ever seen, but more things than we've ever seen. And I've been to the Middle East twice, and you guys on a weekly basis, right? Daily, weekly, whatever. So like, I keep saying law enforcement, I mean first responders.
And that's a fun thing about with Pours of Patriots, is I'm glad you brought that up. This is amazing.
All encompassing.
You're hitting up. It's an evolution. So obviously my comfort level is military people, because I was in it. But when we talk about Pours with Patriots, it absolutely involves the first responders who every day. It's the same thing. They're the same people. Our wiring is fucked up. We operate in a different place, right?
And life is traumatic. Like we all
life's traumatic, like when you're talking about like my part of my family was out of town. I got to deal with 2 fucking dogs and a cat, and one kid.
That's not trauma.
Dude, no, it's more traumatic to me than a lot of things. I'm fucking yelling at the kid that's here. I'm like, motherfucker, you're like, I love. Sorry about the language.
No,
I'm not. But I'm like more irritated about him with a lot of stuff, and I just feel like. It explains a lot of things you talked about before. Is like, I think a lot of us have, I don't know why it is. My wife asked me a lot about this, is why I'm angry all the time, and I wish I could.
Maybe you need Save a Warrior.
No, this is my Save a Warrior. This is absolutely therapeutic for me beyond belief. And there's a couple people. I'll throw them out. Like we talked about Jason tonight. Jason's like, let's swap seat and let me put you over with him and and interview me. I'm not ready for that, but I think I'm giving a piece of me. This is super therapeutic for me. It's why I did it. It's a way for me to process what I'm going through, like the anger, like it, and that. But I just still like, I feel better. But what's sad about me, I don't know how you feel, is what I get mad about is I'll do something that I should be mad about, right? It's not the big a fucking deal. Like, I asked my son to take the recyclables out. He didn't do it. So now my recyclables are stacking up in my garage. That is the worst thing that can happen in the world. I'm angry. And then I say something I should, and I'm just like, Jesus, you don't appreciate him. Listen to me. And then when I have time to think about it, I'll go like, wow, I shouldn't be pissed about that. What's the big deal? The next time this happens, I'm not going to do that. But the sad thing about it is, a week later,
you're pissed again.
I repeat the behavior, and it's one of the things. So like, I think this is my Save the Warrior. Like, I definitely will look into it. I think this is why I was pushing so hard to get you on, and other people. Yeah. A lot of the people I'm hitting you up on the side to come here. Every one of us have a story, and talking about it is therapeutic. You know what I mean? It helps, I think, right?
Yeah, it is. And telling your story. And that story that I told you a little bit ago about the aircraft crash, like I couldn't even get through it without bawling my eyes out for years, because I was so heartbroken for what happened to Mike Cote, and then, James Moore, James, I was trying to get James into OCS to be an officer before, because he's a nurse. And, he's actually, I just wrote him a letter of recommendation to get into for a master's program. But like, and Jason knows him, like you see the guy and you just love the dude, because he's such a good dude. And it's heartbreaking to think that like that guy could have had a long military career as an Army officer. but he got medically discharged because of that. Like the whole story is heartbreaking. The things that happen to everybody, and and the one thing,
but it doesn't have the key thing is it doesn't happen to everybody. I think this is where like, so this is what we talk about. Like if you go back to the whole thing, it was like Jason, who we know was next and to go do this whole process of gunnery, which agree or disagree with it, but if you're the first people to go, you're fucking making fun of people. Like, dude, I'm out there, I'm throwing lead down range. You're not the person. So my coping mechanism. So you talked about before.
Brain fart.
No, it's not a brain fart. It's a sign of weakness. So for me to say, have I ever thought about suicide? Absolutely. I've never said that. I've said that to maybe one or two people. I definitely haven't said it to a lot of people.
Or live.
No, yeah. But the only thing that ever keeps me in check when I say that or think that is everybody that did those things that have put themselves at risk and they're not here today. We all wanted to do it. This isn't the draft military. Somebody's doing things. We're like, we all signed up for this. We're the misfits, right? We're misfits of society. That's how I call myself. And you can agree to disagree. Like, we're wired differently. I keep saying that, and that's my coping mechanism. But I don't think the same as most of my my civilian cohorts. But that's the way I look at it. It's just like, I just know that those people that the worst things that have ever happened to them, they would never want it to be me.
Yeah.
And I probably would have changed. I would have gladly for some people have been that person for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a struggle. That's a hard for me. So this is definitely my save a warrior.
Yeah.
And thank you for everybody that listens. Let me do this. That's what it's super therapeutic for me. And
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean.
Sorry, you're about to make me cry.
Like,
I can't cry because if you cry, then you're gonna cry. Then we're gonna cry. Like,
we're gonna be crying.
We're gonna cry like Andrew. Like everyone's gonna be breaking down.
Cry tonight. No, man. Yeah.
No,
I appreciate you. Well, no, man, you're right. And what I trade places with those guys, and put myself in the cockpit instead of Lionel Hamilton to be dealing with that. Absolutely, in a heartbeat, I would have. It breaks my heart to see that. And I wasn't trying to be rude when I was being a smartass just a minute ago. But it is my coping mechanism all day, every day. Sarcasm. I sprinkle that shit on everything.
But that's the fun thing. This is why I love this conversation. Is and I don't want to digress, but a lot of people that we've had on, like your episode 11, the 11th person of you, like most of the people I've known, you're the second person. I literally met you 15, 20 minutes before, 38 minutes.
Yeah, 30,
if you would have been Chad, you would have been like late, but
would have been walking through the doors.
Yeah, as we're already talking and stuff like that. But no, he did bring a cool charcuterie board, I think. But I mean, what I mean by that is like, that's my coping mechanism. My coping mechanism is humor, sarcasm, and I think for us it's very easy for people to see that, but I think sometimes I don't think people realize how much we're hurting on the back end when we're doing that. It's like see you tonight, it hurts. Like 30 minutes ago when you started talking about the crash, like I can feel the pain, I can feel, and I don't like it. My coping mechanism sometimes is whiskey, which is why we tied that into it. But it's fine. But I do truly appreciate.
Well, and I appreciate that, and if you've looked at any type of history, especially when it comes to veterans and veteran suicide, our great grandfathers came home and they drank themselves to death and worked themselves to death, right?
Yeah.
And some of them killed themselves. And then the Vietnam vets, guys my dad's age, those guys, because drugs were readily available, a lot of those guys drugged, drank, and work themselves to death. My dad's a workaholic.
Yeah.
You know,
So is my dad. My dad, no drugs.
He's a workaholic. He's like, I'm going to die in my chair at work. And I'm like, yeah, you are. You're like, why don't you go live your life a little bit and have a good time? And my stepmom is awesome. She, she goes on vacations with her girlfriends without him. And I'm like, why don't you just take him along? So he goes and does stuff. He's well-traveled, but the whole point is like in our generation is just like, F it. I'm going to just go ahead and end this shit. Like, I'm tired of dealing with it. But the good news is, like, there is programs like Save a Warrior, and I went to the vet center for on and off for 2 years after I came home from Iraq, because those guys down there are awesome. They get it. Like, they have small group. They have, like, the guy that I went to was actually a chaplain in the Ohio National Guard, and he was a full-time at the vet center. So that's we didn't even talk about that. Like, I was going to see those guys, and then I went to Save a Warrior, and then I went for as the executive director. And I was telling my story at, some of the cohorts and talking about my life and being vulnerable, and, and having a big cry and hug fest. But guys appreciate that. Guys appreciate your vulnerability. And if you can tell your story, and if you, especially to somebody that seems like they have their shit together, not that I do have my shit together. Some days I do, but some days I do. But I've done a lot of work to get in the position where I'm at. I was a helicopter pilot. I have a master's degree. I have a small real estate business. Like, I've been working my tail off, and people just respect the work that I've done. Right. Yeah. You don't have to respect me, but like the fact that people see that on a resume, or the fact that I tell that, people respect that. And when you tell your story of like, hey man, I've been at the bottom of the barrel and I've been fucked up. Don't excuse my language. I've been fucked up. I've been to the bottom of the barrel where I've ready to off myself. And you can come back from that. The good news is, like, it goes back to the surviving, striving, and thriving. Like, you can come back from that. Like, you can have a comeback story. The problem is, guys and gals. I say guys, it's plural term, more than one. But you can come back from that. Like, you can absolutely come back to that and have you can flourish in life. But if you don't have anybody to help steer you onto that, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a friend, and a lot of times, we can talk to our fellow military friends, but like, if you have somebody, especially like that program, I highly recommend that. I'm actually part of a new men's group. I'm going to give a plug for these guys, but it's a men's group called K4, so there's some of my Save a Warrior brothers are in this. A previous provider from Save a Warrior started this, him and another guy. And so I'm going through the process of, like, there's actually like a 16-week process to go through and unpack, which I've done most of that, because all the shit that I've dealt with when I went through Save a Warrior, I unpacked all the crap that happened. So I'm rehashing that. But like, K4 is another men's group, and it's not military specific, but like, there are men's groups out there that can help you process this stuff.
And men and women. So
men's and women. Yeah. I'm sorry. So,
and I don't think, because there are like, I hope in this group we don't have to always address that, but I still do. That when we talk about that, there's all these groups that are inclusive.
Yeah, because Save a Warrior's putting through female cohorts all the time.
Yeah. It's important, but I mean, for women. I laughed earlier, like when you're talking about the equine thing, and I think the funny thing is to find what gets you through it. I mean, like, so if it's like riding horses, it's scuba diving. There's tons of veteran things that do that. My coping mechanism was for long. It's just to keep myself completely crazy busy.
Me too.
Take too many things I can't handle. Then all the things that I volunteer for, I'm mad at my family because I chose to do that. And then I go a certain amount of time, then I crash, and then I like recharge and do it. So whatever, what's important, I think, for me in this channel is to find what gets you it doesn't matter what the fuck gets you out of the bad part to get back to thriving, because we all we can thrive again. I mean, it's like I've said many times before, suicide is not an option. It's not an option. It shouldn't be an option. Like, we're the strongest.
We've done too many.
We're the strongest, baddest motherfuckers on the planet that have done stuff that so many people don't like. I mean, simple shit like that. That's what. I'm glad I've been really excited to have you on, because it's like that's the shit I can't understand. Like the normal, simple things that we did, if you tell a lot of people, they're like, you're crazy. And they're just like, what are you fucking talking about? Like this is,
that's a normal
this
day
is
in the
nothing.
office.
I am like the low end of the top 10%. And that's what I don't understand is like, we're the baddest, all, not just military, but the first, like we're the baddest motherfuckers on this planet. We've done some things that most people can't even imagine doing. And that's what always in my mind, it just tears me up to like, I'm mad at myself that I've even thought that before. And to say out loud that I've thought that like killing myself would be better for me, my family, everybody else. But then I'm like, there's something always snaps me out of that. And that's what it is like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I mean, my worst day is never going to happen ever again, I hope. I mean, I mean, unless it's total Armageddon and then like zombies and all that kind of stuff, and then
it's gun season. Let's go.
Which goes into the next thing we're talking about. I need Ray is a huge gun guy, so I'm gonna funnel up some money to make me an AR-15. I think that's the way I did it in a cheaper version. But no, that's the funny thing to talk about, and I truly have been super excited. Jason has been trying to get you on for a while and doing it because I know your past, and like I'm kind of humbled to be with you, not because of your military experience, right? So you've done some pretty unique things that we talked about, but absolutely the Save the Warrior thing is super humbling to me, and I really appreciate that. I can't tell you how much that means to me. It's like all the shit you've done. If you told me you have some stuff here that you're as a company carrying involved in some really cool stuff, but the fact for 2 years that you're involved in an organization that is trying to fix our wiring, that's your brother to me, and I really appreciate that, man.
And you saying that means a lot to me. Thank you. And I will also thank the folks at Save a Warrior who trusted me to put them through the 5.5 days. What we used to previously do, it's 3.5 days now, but
12 days now.
It should be like a year-long process. No, but no, like I'm just thankful that I was put in the position that I was, because one of the secret sauces to life is, giving something to somebody else that they can never repay you back. I mean, it's truly like, selfishly, you give selflessly. And, I'm so humbled and grateful that I was even put in the position to do that. And I think because of my story and the things that happened to me, I was fit for that job, and like a lot of other guys that are doing the work now. So I'm humbled and I'm grateful, and thank you for that comment. I really appreciate that.
So John, who's usually a wise guy, wise ass,
John Barlow.
Love the overall purpose behind this podcast and love the discussion that happened here. I did too, John. And it's you should not be humbled. I mean, I think that's the funny thing about it is thank you for everything you've done, and I'm just glad to have you here. And I'll throw it out to, like, I've been hitting up a bunch of veterans and I'm calling you guys out. We've been very, very reluctant to come down here. Hopefully Chad will come earlier with the charcuterie board. We have a lot of stuff you don't see behind the scenes,
board.
Yeah, but come down and
charcuterie
board. But no, they come down. So like, I see every veteran has a story. There's a lot of stuff that like I struggle with this form because you have like Jocko. He's
he's so intense, Jocko.
And he has a deep down voice, so intense. And he's done some great things. But he's the top tier of what we've done. And I think a lot of veterans mistake that, and that's why I'm trying to get that form. Like, I've had a couple of veterans say, like, I'm not interesting. I don't have to say, like, I think everybody I've had on up to you, I thank them for coming on, because everyone's story is important, because that one story, whether you don't think it's important, it may resonate with someone else, and that's the whole point of the whole thing. So I thank you for coming in. I'm getting a lot of flack from the guys in the back that we missed our second featured whiskey. Right, so we start off early now. I kind of purposely did that. Sorry. They said I waited 45 minutes. I'm waiting an hour and some time.
Let's go. They're like,
well,
hey, I told them the hand and arm signal is tapping.
Yeah, I know it. I know it. And unfortunately, we could probably talk with Ray for a little bit. I'm gonna try to push him to the limit, but Ray, unfortunately, some other.
I got my K4 men's group tonight.
Yeah, tonight, which is important. Like
Zoom call. Yeah, you gotta
be on there. We can kind of zoom in now, but so we'll go to the second featured whiskey tonight. You've seen it on the table for a little bit.
What am I saying?
Michter's
what am I saying? What I'm drinking?
So we're drinking right now the Michter. You actually drank it earlier. I poured it for you earlier, but it's Michter's 10-year single barrel bourbon. And a lot of people seem to have the rye
Jason,
on the
I feel
table
like you
as well.
need to be directing this thing. You need to have like one of them little things like action. You need to be.
He is doing some stuff. That's the favorite thing. It's really cool behind the scenes. You guys don't see it. We try not to, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the camera, which is cool. But originally, Michter's was known as the Bomberger.
That is smooth.
So, yeah. More recently known as Michter's. It's actually it's a non-operating distillery that closed in 1989. At the time when it closed down in 1989, was America's smallest commercial distillery at the time. And right now, most of the products in the market for Michter's and Bombergers, which is out there, they have no tie to that original distillery in Pennsylvania. In 2004, all versions of Michter's whiskey were sold, or now sold. Those versions, Bombergers, Michter's, are sold under the Michter's label, and are owned by Chatham Imports. So it's one of those companies that sold out. We talk about that. Not we joke around, but there's a lot of these.
They sold, or they're a sellout.
It's a weird way to do it. Like there's a lot of big name whiskey companies and that have been in the United States a long time, and especially with bourbon, which is America's only spirit, are not owned by American companies, which is fine. As long as you keep producing it, I don't care if you sold out or you're a sellout. Just keep producing good bourbon and whiskey, and I'll be happy. The Chatham did build a new distillery, which is on Whiskey Row downtown in Louisville, Kentucky. If you haven't been there, Whiskey Row is pretty historical, but also pretty awesome. A lot of major distillers have come back there. Michter's 10-year rye is actually, or 10-year bourbon is actually, the rye is up there too, but it's just like the rye is a annual release. And it's not distilled by Michter's, it's distilled by a Kentucky distillery. It's undisclosed. So I love the mystery. That's the same thing. Like, it's a mystery who's doing it. We don't know, but it is aged. Hello,
Trace. They're doing it.
The quote I have to read it, like I found, was like, "Don't worry, but is aged under the watchful eye of both Dan McKee and Andrea Wilson, the master distiller and master of maturation, to ensure that each release meets the criteria of the label." So
I feel like you're reading that for a commercial.
I feel like you're doing
a commercial.
I know, it was one of the things I thought was a quote, like, just feel good. It's and a lot of and if you're into whiskey, and this is funny. This is not what this podcast is supposed to be about. I don't know if it's a podcast. Facebook Live. I don't know what the hell we call this, but it's not supposed to be all about whiskey. But I thought that was a funny quote. But they're like many other people. They contract distill. It's not new, but they just have this like cool quotes about it where you're like, "Don't worry, we're overseeing." But the good thing about it is actually this product, Michter's is now distilling their own distillate, and the plans in the future is to have their own.
Don't you use your big words on me? Distillate. 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 Distillate.
Come on,
distillate.
It's such a big word. But this is actually, unlike the one we had before that's actually age-dated, 10 years old. It's actually rumored to be older than that, most of them. It's 94.4 proof, so went 4.4 proof higher than what we normally drink. Hopefully we'll be able to get on your same call and be fine. And then, like the one we talked about before, is it's contracted still, and they don't talk about what the mash bills is. But thank you for doing that. It's been he's got 2 Glens over there. I feel like I'm missing it. I don't even know what he has in the other one, but
don't you worry about that. Don't you worry about what I got over here.
I have you for 2 more. I have you for 2 more minutes. So I'm gonna ask you the one question. I put away the Bible. It's getting thick. Which
No more questions.
No, it's getting
comments complete.
The questions are getting big. It's funny. I'm pretty proud about like.
Wait, is that a Bible for real?
Yeah, for you. I got all kinds of shit about you on there, but we have to get to the important stuff. But final question.
Sure.
And I want to keep you past 8:15.
No, we can run over.
Yeah. So you were an
rough
enlisted guy in 3ID. You were commissioned officer as a captain. You were a CW2. So I call you Chief, which you guys.
Chief.
Do you hate it?
No, I'm good.
We'll call you
Ray.
Ray.
It's endearing.
Yeah. So what would of those 3 levels? We'll call them levels. What was your favorite? What? I know the answer you should say to me, but
you're gonna say I need to be a chief.
No,
captain.
100%.
I tell you,
100% because you talked about some things. I think that the commission officer it falls on that. For me, is that leadership role. The CW warrant officer, you're kind of on your own. You're fine, but you as a commission officer, we're responsible for a lot of things that we probably shouldn't be. We should have never been involved with.
You should not have put me in charge of a lot of things that I was in charge of, but I was.
I told Ray not to drink in Shay's basement and get a DWI, but he did.
And here
it's
we
still
are.
My fault, sir.
And here we are. No, I tell you, I was really, I joined the commission officer rank to be a leader. Right. I was actually going to go SF. I was going to be a Green Beret. I wasn't going to be aviation. And for me, being down on the ground, doing the cool guy shit is really what I wanted to do. And it was all about leadership for me because I feel like I played team sports growing up. I played basketball for many years. And I feel like,
you need to lift more.
I do need to lift a little bit more. I'm getting soft in my old age. What? Sorry, I didn't say anything. Okay. But I was really proud to be a captain, and when guys, Jason Lindsay was one of them. The guys would send me shit like, "Hey man, you were the best company commander I've ever had. Like, thank you so much." Like that to me is like, holy shit. Like that's. Like it, I can't even describe that. Like when guys tell you that, and when my boss is like, but guy, he's the state aviation officer now for Ohio, is like, man, I had to have 3 guys replace you because of the work that you did when you were a captain. I had to have 3 lieutenants replace you. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, dude. He's like, you don't realize how impactful you were. And Jason knows because like all the door gunneries that we did over in Indiana, and guys would be like, dude, this is the best door gunnery we've had. And I had a direct hand.
Was that Jason? I don't.
Well, actually, Jason, yeah, because he was in the back because you were an FI at the time. He was telling guys where to point the guns and shoot shit. So
you guys will see Jason's ripping his shirt off, doing like
he's like Superman. Let's go. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. Superman. But like being a captain was really great. I tell you, the quality of life as a warrant was awesome, and I had a lot of fun flying. But I feel like I made the most impact as a captain, and that's why I was in the Army. Or that's why I became a commission guy in the Army in the first place. So so that absolutely totally
serves my point of that. Commission officers are always right. It's the best way to go. No, it's true. The leadership impact
says the first sergeant. Says the guy that's in leadership now, first sergeant,
and another senior NCO. They had the hand.
He's like, whatever.
No, but I think it was interesting to say that because not to say that like to digress because we're like to be important to people, but not to say that there's not warrant officers that have been leaders in the organization. I had many warrant officers. They were super leaders.
I have more warrant officers.
I just want to
more warrant officer mentors than I have commission officer mentors. So there's a lot of
there's no wrong. There's no wrong.
I was enlisted first. Yes.
There's no wrong answer on that to do that. Yeah. I just wanted to. It's really been fun to pick that. So, so we're coming toward the time. I've taken you 2 minutes. Past that, I just want to again thank you for coming aboard. I know you have some of the things to do, so we'll get to the part I call the dark part of each podcast or Facebook Live event, however you want to call it. But the most important of why we do it. So tonight we're going to honor a fellow Patriot, and tonight we're going to honor another Army aviator who who unfortunately thought that taking his life was the right answer. So tonight we're going to honor Army Captain Ian Samuel Morrison, who was 26 years old. Ian took his life on March 21st, 2012, while he was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, the 229th Aviation Regiment in Fort Hood, Texas. Ian was born on October 25th, 1985 in Camp Lejeune. While he was in high school, had a very diverse thing. He was into music, art, cross country, and was also a captain of the swim team there in high school. Ian also graduated from West Point in 2007. So if people know that those people that go to West Point are not your top people in the world, so he did that, and actually, and as an Army, he graduated in 2007 as an Army aviator. He in 2009 he earned his pilot's wings and was assigned to the 229th Aviation Regiment at Fort Hood, Texas. He served with pride and honor. He deployed to Iraq, where he served in 70 missions as an Apache helicopter pilot or driver. What's the best way to say it? Driver, pilot?
Well,
what do they like to say? I don't know.
60 UH-60 pilot. I like calling them hawk drivers.
There you go. Yeah.
He's a hawk driver.
Yeah, he's a hawk driver. Yeah. Ian was compassionate and a loving person. This is why I always try to draw on what people have said about him. He was kind and helpful and always sought out the good in people and dedicated himself to everything he did. His sense of humor and loving spirit will be missed beyond measure by those who ever knew him. He loved the outdoors, playing with his dogs, working out like Ray over there, and spending time playing his guitar. And what's funny about a lot of people you see the savages or people who do these like super destructive things. He was a super artist on the guitar. He was actually pretty well known about that. He's survived by his wife Rebecca, his parents Gregory and Kathleen, his brother Benjamin, his sister Joanna. And one of the things to talk about him is I'm trying to ring the bell. It's a long time ago. It was 10 years ago. It still makes a difference, but before he deployed, was doing well. He came back. He was struggling with what a lot of us were struggling with. We can't sleep, a lot of stuff like that. He went to a couple of flight surgeons. They gave him sleeping pills. They gave him antidepressants. And actually, the day that he took his life, he actually called into the Department of Defense suicide line, and unfortunately was put on hold and went to his house and took his life. So, but times have changed. It's 10 years ago. There's a lot of things. This week has been an awesome week about the number one thing is for mental health, not only for veterans, first responders, but everybody. There's now our own 3-number way to get help, 988. So we talked about a number before, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can press 1 or you can text 838-255. You just lost me, but hey, dial 988, just like 911, dial 988. It drives you into all those same programs that were before we talked about with the old Veterans Crisis Hotline, the same therapists or the same people helping. So definitely this is a big thing that happened this week, and I hope it's a game changer. It's a lot of numbers. As many times as I've said it, I still don't have it memorized. But definitely now it's easy to remember 988. And as always, if you're struggling, dial 988, dial, I don't know why you would do it anymore, but dial 1-800-273-8255, press 1. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, and like a lot of us don't, I think the group is growing. I'm always here to help. I'm definitely not a mental health professional.
Yeah.
I definitely don't say the right thing 90% of the time, but I will.
But you're there. But you'll show up for somebody if they need you.
I'll show up 110%
I guarantee that.
of the time, man. Which, wow.
Yep.
We're kind of bonding hard.
Hey, man,
I definitely would show up 110% of the time. But that's into episode 12. Ray's got to get going. Again, thank you, Ray. Thank you for your service to your country in every aspect that many of us has: enlisted, warrant, commissioned officer, which is always the best.
All the above.
People doubting officers, and then the most important, like I said before, your service for 2 years and your continued service to the mental health aspect of veterans and first responders. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming down, and you're always welcome.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. Anybody out there that's struggling, 988, look at saveawarrior.org. If you're not having problems, but you feel like you need a little bit of an adjustment, look at K4, men's group. That's a great group to be part of as well. And that's not for military. That's not specific for military or first responders. But if you're out there struggling, by all means, look up saveawarrior.org. It's free to you. It's a 3.5-day thing in Ohio. You get here, sit your butt in the seat, and help process all the trauma and the things that you've been through. And, unscrew that old way of thinking and screw your head back on straight and get back into life so you can be.
So how do you get to the K4 men's? Is there a way to?
Yeah, they're online. It's all online. If you search on Google, you'll find everything. Yeah, Save a Warrior, super easy to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh said he'll.
Josh is all over it.
He'll link it after, but yeah,
believe it or not, we have
look
some
at those
professional stuff going on behind the scenes. I'm always
professional things by unprofessional guys talking on the mic. Yeah, but thank you again for having me and having the conversation we had tonight. So thank you very much.
I can't tell you how important it is. So we'll end with a quote. We start with a quote. We end with a quote. There's one I didn't put up, so I'll say this one before I go to the final quote. Don't put it up yet, Josh. So the one I didn't put up was, which I thought was pretty amazing. It ties into my dad. Is by Vietnam, the Jeep had given way to the helicopter, and it's hard to imagine a modern army fighting a war without this supremely adaptable workhorse. Saul David. So I thought that was a pretty cool quote. Good one, but I went to the final one. So we'll go to the final one. As a helicopter pilot, I hope you approve. This is from Igor Sikorsky. So everybody knows Igor.
Hey,
Sikorsky.
Black Hawk helicopter.
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
go.
Oh, what? Yep. Look at this. This is crazy. And it said the helicopter is probably the most versatile instrument ever invented by man. It approaches closer than any other to the fulfillment of mankind's ancient dreams of the flying horse and the magic carpet.
Hell yeah. I love that.
Yeah, and that's again from Igor Sikorsky. It's kind of an important name in aviation, so it's amazing. But thank you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and, thank you for having me.
Again. So that's the end of episode 12. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
We're out.
It's 12.